Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Wednesday, April 9th, 2025, and today we're going to spend most of today's episode on sweet potatoes, from growing the slips to eating and selling the vines, interplanting, all of it. So let's do it. All right, well, happy Wednesday, everyone. I hope everyone's April so far is off to a decent start. Yesterday, I had a few new small gullies I had to repair from all the rain and about a week of planting to catch up on. Mostly it's lettuce that I'm behind on from all that rain, and I normally would wait till after the cold snap that we're having this morning, but I got a couple of beds in yesterday anyway and got them covered for the hard frosts. To just get that off the list, because it was starting to stack up a little bit there. Oh, and I neglected to mention that with Florida winning the national championship on Monday, congrats or whatever, our NCAA bracket challenge is officially over. So congratulations to the winner, Mark Ingleson, who I will be sending a book admitting my defeat soon. So make sure to reply to that email, Mark, and I'll get that over to you. I mean, I never win these things, but I'm always disappointed that I never win these things. Fun season though, and we'll get them next year. All right, so today we're going to talk sweet potatoes. These things are one of my favorite crops in the world. I love to grow them. I love to eat them. Sweet potatoes are just the best. So for you, why should you bother even caring about this crop? Well, obviously, sweet potatoes are incredibly nutritious, so there's that. You probably aren't eating enough sweet potatoes as it is, but they also make both a relatively easy storage crop and, as far as storage crops go, can be a little bit more on the profitable side than others if you're selling them. They can be grown in a wider range of climates than people, I think, realize, and they're delicious. Did I say that part already? So that's important. First, we grow an heirloom variety called Golden Nugget that's been in this region for over 100 years, but that does not mean our variety is the right one for you. Further south, and you may be fine growing that same variety, but further north, and you might want a shorter day sweet potato than the one we grow. Ours takes about 120 days or more to grow. In much of the northern part of America or up to Canada, that just won't fly. That's too long. So you'd want a sweet potato closer to 90 or 100 days, unless you want to take up valuable tunnel space with them, which is probably not the best use, but it's sweet potatoes. I don't blame you. But to be sure, this is a crop that has been grown as far north as Maine, as far as I know, here in the United States. So it's not just a southern thing. To get started, you can order what are called slips. Those are like baby plants, or start your own slips with the sweet potatoes themselves. What we have always done, though I'm reconsidering the necessity of this exact approach for reasons that will make sense presently, what we've long done is that we have just laid out the potatoes in a tray, covered them with potting soil or older compost or whatever to let them sprout in the greenhouse. Then when we were ready to plant, we would just pull the sprouts out and plant those. We'd mud them, basically like dip them in a slurry of mud or compost or compost, and then plant them. However, last year, as I've detailed in this episode, in an episode last fall, I was telling my buddy Jeff Poppin that I'd been having this issue with a disease called scurf. It basically is this fungal infection that it's like this black colored fungal infection that doesn't really do much to the potato flavor or storageability necessarily, but it does make them less marketable. So anyway, lately I told him the problem had been getting a little bit worse, and I couldn't figure out why, because the soil was getting better, but the potatoes just were getting more and more scurf. And Jeff told me to try planting the potato slips without roots on, which seemed ludicrous to me, as I assumed they would easily fail. In my mind, the roots helped the plants to establish when you were planting them in the soil, but without the roots, I assumed you were just planting like a plant that was basically already dead. And he responded, that's exactly what I thought. So instead of pulling the slips out of the bins like I normally would, and just with all those roots on, I cut them off at the soil surface and started planting those. And well, long story short, it cured our scurf issue almost 100%. Night and day the difference, with only like a couple plants showing any scurf at all out of several, probably like 1,000. So anyway, I'm rethinking the need to grow out such large slips as I used to anymore, but that's the idea. Basically, you need the potatoes to grow plants, and then you need to cut the plants from the potatoes, avoiding getting any of the skin of the potato on there. And effectively, they just don't need to be that long. It's almost better if the slip is short, in fact, especially if no roots are actually on them. We usually start our slips about 6 weeks before planting, and we usually plant in mid-May. I think in the future, we will just set them in a shallower tray rather than in deep bends like we did again this year, and apply a light layer of soil mix instead of several inches since the roots are no longer the goal. And in that case, maybe 4 or 5 weeks before planting would make more sense, because like I said, if they're too long, like if the slips are too long at planting, they can result in harder to establish plants because the leaves just kind of burn up easily. Honestly, it doesn't even really need much of a leaf to establish. Now, my ratio is 8 to 10 initial slips per pound of sweet potatoes, with mini slips coming afterward. So that's a very conservative, and 100% will vary a little bit on the variety and your preparation and all those things. But you will get like roughly 8 slips per pound of sweet potatoes. That has served us pretty well, just that ratio. So for instance, if you want to do a single 100-foot row at 10 inches apart, which is kind of what we do, you'll want to start roughly 10 pounds of sweet potatoes. If you don't get enough to plant the entire row the first week, just wait another week and more slips will sprout, and they will do that all season. So that's fun. How many should you plant? Well, one sweet potato plant will yield roughly, I don't know, it can range, but anywhere from like 3 to 5 pounds of sweet potatoes each plant, depending on the variety you're using, the length of season. Remember that sweet potatoes are roots, not tubers, so they don't stop growing at a certain point necessarily. The longer the season, the bigger the sweet potato will grow. So how much you plant will depend on how many sweet potatoes you want, with it factored in to save X amount for next year to grow out as many slips as you need. So in other words, grow how many of you want plus the amount that you'll need for slips, which may not be that many, but if you're doing, an acre of sweet potatoes, then it's a lot. We've used the same potatoes for many, many years. I think this year is year 16 with the same variety. So yeah, set them in trays, keep them moist to let them sprout, and get ready to plant, which we'll talk about in the third segment. Real quick, though, we will take a little detour to get a poignant question from a Patreon member about sweet potato interplanting. BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Farmhand. Newsletters, right? A necessary evil for CSA farmers. Join Farmhand and real CSA farmers on April 11th for a free digital workshop where they'll share strategies they use to turn their newsletters into powerful sales tools. Get the secrets and go-to templates for success when you register for the free workshop today at farmhand.partners/newsletter. That's farmhand.partners/newsletter. And I'll put the link in the show notes. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Isla at Sunny Stomp Farm. Great name. Again, this is from that collection of questions I inadvertently skipped over as well. Sorry about that. And it goes nicely with today's subject. They write, quote, "Hi, Jesse. Huge fan and love all you do. Question, you mentioned growing dent/popcorn with /between sweet potatoes in your book and in the show the other day. I'm wondering if you can plant it with sweet corn. I can't find info on that combo anywhere. We farm in BC, British Columbia, presumably, and would love to try sweet potatoes for the first time. Hope it warms up for everyone down there. Your friends in Canada, Ayla." End quote. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Ayla, or Isla. Could be either. So this is a great question, and I will talk about interplanting sweet corn, but also just interplanting and sweet potatoes in general. I've touched on this before, like you mentioned, but I'll add a little bit of extra elaboration here to fill in some of the gaps, because I think sweet potatoes are an underappreciated interplant, and there is more that could be done with them than even I do. And I do way too much playing around in the garden, generally speaking. All right, so first, to answer your question, technically, yes, you can interplant sweet corn with sweet potatoes, but your issue will be the harvest. That will require you to roll over them with a tote or a wheelbarrow or something, roll over the vines, which will effectively smash those vines and could potentially limit their production or reduce their yields. How much is hard to say, like how much reduction, but in your climate, every little bit is going to help, so I wouldn't mess with them too much. What I like to do with sweet potatoes is, as you said, interplant flint or dent corns or popcorns or whatever with them, because it's basically just plant it and forget it. Once the popcorn or whatever corn is done, it's time to harvest the sweet potatoes anyway, so stomping on the vines is not going to make a huge difference in the yield at that point. However, sweet corn is a green harvest, so you want to harvest that early. Usually we do it over the course of like a week, so it's 2 or 3 passes, plus it's heavy, so you end up walking in and out of that area quite a few times. For contrast, we usually just harvest the dry popcorn and mow the vines within a couple days of each other. So one note though about corn and sweet potatoes is that you would still want to give both crops more space than usual, because corn is a hungry, thirsty crop and could potentially lose some yield and steal some yield from your sweet potatoes at the same time if too intensively planted. Another crop that would work is something like dried beans, especially taller bush varieties, or things like soybeans, like if you want to grow your soybeans out all the way. I've heard of people using okra as well, but again, that's a crop you'd have to visit quite a lot, and the vine stomping isn't great for most sweet potato varieties. Sweet corn would be better comparatively because it's really just 1 or 2 visits total as opposed to multiple visits per week. Sunflowers are another one that could work, especially for seeds. Like you just plant your sunflower and let it just go all the way to seed. I mean, some birds will get to it, but you can go through there one time, harvest it, and be done. Crops that I wouldn't mess with too much are, again, things I would need to visit a lot, or things like winter squash or watermelons that vine out and hide their fruits in the sweet potatoes. Harvesting all those hidden squashes or melons I would imagine that would be a nightmare. You'd probably end up losing a lot and mowing over some when you're mowing your sweet potato vines. One that I'm kind of just now thinking about could be cool is something like cayenne peppers, where you could just let the peppers grow and dry on the plant and then harvest like the popcorn, sort of. I mean, I guess you'd take the whole plant, but you do it right before the sweet potato harvest begins, just before those first frosts of fall. I'll talk a bit more about harvesting sweet potatoes in the next segment, but the big thing when it comes to interplanting is give them a bit more space, or even just having a different crop in between beds of sweet potatoes. So the sweet potato vines are really just providing a little living mulch to whatever crop is in between them. Anyway, I hope that's a bit helpful. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we will plant and harvest our sweet potatoes. BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit rimmelgreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a Rimmel tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process. So make sure to check them out. Okay, so for ground preparation in terms of sweet potatoes, we had used a mulch, honestly, for quite a few years, but then several people at one conference I went to said they were having issues with moles and voles eating the roots under mulch, so I decided to back off a little bit on my mulching of sweet potatoes just in case. Between all our cat and all of our snakes and those sorts of things, we don't have a huge issue with moles and voles, but I also don't want to press my luck because I had noticed a slight uptick in damage. So instead of just kind of pushing that too far, we typically rely on whatever the mulch was there the year before, usually a cover crop or a hay mulch. We tarp over that over the winter, pull back the tarp in May, and then shove the slips immediately into nice but not too heavily mulched soil while it's still moist from the tarping and free of weed seeds from the tarping. That is the easiest way I've found to do kind of like a no-till planting with sweet potatoes. You could do a light surface tillage just to prep the soil, but you really, really have to cultivate after that. It's nice to just go into weed-free soil. If you don't want to or have tarps, you don't have to. You just have to deal with the weeds a little bit more. Weeds can be a challenge in sweet potatoes, so that part becomes important. You want to cultivate early and often. You definitely do not want to be stomping around in the sweet potatoes, hand-pulling weeds any more than you have to. To be clear, a little bit of stomping on the vines is totally fine. You're not going to destroy your yields, but you want to reduce that as much as possible. Like, it's way harder on things like squash plants, winter squash, to stomp on them than it is on sweet potatoes. They're much more resilient. You just want to reduce it a little bit. So you definitely don't want to be stomping around in the sweet potatoes, pulling weeds. Sweet potatoes are relatively drought tolerant too, but they will suffer in a really dry year. We can dry farm them here, but it definitely gets close some years. Like last year we were really dry and the sweet potatoes told us about it. Sometimes establishing the slips, even in a dry farm situation, especially now that we don't have the roots on to take care of them, can take some irrigation and maybe even shade cloth if it's hot and sunny. Fertility-wise, sweet potatoes don't need much, if anything. In decent soil, you will not really need or want to fertilize them. A light layer of compost is more than enough, but probably even that is not entirely necessary. But too much fertility will lead to excessive greens and smaller or even cracked roots. So when it comes to sweet potatoes, less is definitely more. If the soil is exceedingly compacted, a broad forking will be important just to make sure they have room to grow. So we cut our slips at the surface. Like I said, we dip them in a compost slurry to get them, inoculated with some good microbes and some good moisture for the roots to kind of get started. Our spacing is around 10 inches. That's 25 centimeters apart in a row with 2 rows on a 48-inch bed. That's a 122 centimeter bed. If you're using like the 30-inch bed / 75 centimeter system, go with a 1 row, just a single row. More space between plants and rows, and you will get bigger roots. Less, and you will get smaller roots, which may be preferred for some markets. Chefs and stuff often like really big ones. A lot of consumers, I find, like smaller ones that they can just roast really easy. Depends on the consumer, depends on the market. You kind of have to try both. Then once the slips take, it's basically just leaving them alone until right around a frost, picking out weeds a couple times in the coming months. You also can eat some of those greens along the way. They make great sauteing green. Sweet potato greens being a traditional food item in many African cuisines. And if you're watching on YouTube, you are probably noticing how different our greens look than typical sweet potatoes. And that's because our sweet potatoes rule. That's it. That's the only reason. If you are going to use greens, just don't take too many from your main patch or risk reducing that yield. Same thing with like stomping on them. Instead, you can just throw all of your sweet potato slips from the tray or whatever into a row, just dig a furrow and dump them in there really tight, and then harvest greens all season like crazy. They can sell at market. We've often put them in a CSA as well. They make a great CSA item, in fact, and it's fun for people to get a chance to cook with something a little different. You just have to be careful doing that in a region where sweet potatoes will not die over the winter, like tropical regions, and they could become a weed issue. For us, they die, and then they fertilize the soil that way, and worms love them, so that's awesome. Now, for harvest, we wait until right before the first frost. If it's going to frost, we mow the patch or risk damage to the roots. Like, you don't want the patch to frost really hard because it will damage the roots. So we mow the patch and fork out each plant individually because you can typically see where the cluster is after you mow it. You basically, in really nice soil or like really loose soil or sandy soil perhaps, you can just pull that whole cluster out really without forking. But for us, we did, just because of the clay, we have to. There's no getting around that. You can also use a plow on a larger scale, but the challenge sort of with a plow is that a regular potato plow will often slice right through them because sweet potatoes grow down like fingers into the soil, whereas regular potatoes kind of grow out. So it's a little bit easier for those potato plows to get underneath them if you're going to use a plow. I don't prefer the plow because it can cause slicks in the soil, but if you're going to plow them, you definitely have to think about not trying to cut straight through the potato. Or you have to get a special sweet potato plow, which is, a cost. So it's possible. You just have to be careful. Curing sweet potatoes is key to their flavor, as this is the time when they convert their sugars to starches. All too often, I see growers at market bringing freshly harvested sweet potatoes, and I'm like, it's no wonder people dump marshmallows and whipped cream on those things because they are not sweet potatoes, but starch potatoes at that point. To cure them and make them sweet, I do a breakdown of this of this particular process in the Living Soil Handbook, and I think I did a video on it. I also do it with 6 other crops in the no-till context. If you're interested, you can pick that up at no-tillgrowers.com to support this work. But to cure sweet potatoes, they need to be kept at around 80 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 27 to 30 degrees Celsius for 14 days at 100% humidity. We use the greenhouse for this, or if it's cold or cloudy those weeks, we use a room like a closet or something with a heater. Basically, we stack the baskets, cover them with a thick blanket or several thick blankets to retain the humidity of the potatoes themselves. If you're in a dry climate, you may have to put like a pan of water in there just to have some humidity. And then we just make sure it doesn't get too hot. We cooked them inadvertently one year when we forgot to open the greenhouse. That was cool. We lost like thousands and thousands of pounds of sweet potatoes, or gained a few hundred pounds of compost, however you want to look at it. After 2 weeks, they can be stored in the house in a cool closet or attic, or preferably in a cellar. You're looking for that like 55 to 60 degree temperature, or 12 to 15 degrees Celsius. Then after that, you just roast them, add butter, and slam. That's the whole process. We usually sell sweet potatoes at around $3 a pound, but that will depend on your market and wholesale versus retail, of course. So 100 feet with 300 to 600 pounds harvest, give or take. It just depends on, like I said, variety, all those things, season. I don't think I have to throw in too many more caveats, but you get the idea. Even at that can mean anywhere from like $900 to $1,800 or more for a bed of sweet potatoes. Or for wholesale, maybe it's closer to $500 to $1,200, which still ain't bad for a storage crop so long as you can move them. And they will store in the right conditions all the way up until now. Ours are just now, after a winter of storage, starting to get starchy as they convert their sugars back to starches to start the process all over again. All right, let me know your sweet potato methods or thoughts or experiences or questions. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap it there. Don't forget we are now officially a 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. There are some options in the show notes for donations, which shouts to Jay Wells and Kathleen Willis for taking advantage of that option yesterday. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you are getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and to the team at No Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of April, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Garrett Mangini. It's a cool looking name. I'm not sure I'm saying it right. Lou Bellman and Patrick Weaver. All right, so we're back on our energy potato farm, and it's been a kind of long, grueling season for the crew, mulching and really the big job there on the farm is protecting the crop from deer and raccoons and the like, because you see the problem with this crop is that it has a lot of pests. Basically every pest, because every pest wants in on this like energy potato. This is a crop that never has pests, right? So, but in this particular case with the energy potato, they are all over it. So anyway, the mulch blocks the weeds, but the crew are all really there, all assigned by the judges, there to fight the wildlife or to hold them back. And the wildlife, well, they get a little ravenous for these energy potatoes and energy potato greens once they taste them. And the crew counts down the days to harvest because sleepless nights and long days of chasing angry animals takes its toll. So, yeah, we're inching closer to the conclusion of this story. It's gonna be a doozy. All right, thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you tomorrow for Thursday. Awesome.